So whether you're a brand new photographer looking to get your feet wet in real estate photography, or you're looking to see the differences in overall camera quality between the three cameras that we're going to be talking about today. Well, in today's video, guys, I'm going to be going over the three cameras that I used when I first started my business, which is the iPhone 13, the Canon M50, and the Sony A7IV. Let's dive into the video. So like the title and intro suggest, we're going to be comparing all three of these cameras today with a special emphasis in real estate photography, because this is the path that I took to get into real estate photography. I started with the iPhone, I moved into the Canon M50, and when I saved up enough money, I got the Sony A7IV. But there's pretty big price differences between the three, especially with the Sony, and you may be wondering what the actual difference in quality is. Well, in today's video, guys, we're going to be going over all three of these cameras. I'm going to be taking you to multiple different listings. I had to go to multiple different listings just because I wanted to get the best comparative analysis for you guys, so you guys see where the cameras actually look pretty good together and where there's some stark differences in between the three. I didn't have a lot of money when I started my business, so each one of these cameras was a significant investment for me. It's even the iPhone 13, because I had an iPhone 8 before I got the iPhone 13. So even moving up and getting this camera was a big step for me with the intent of shooting real estate photography, and all three of these cameras helped me make money and build my business to where it's at today. So all of these cameras are really important to me, and more than likely you're kind of on the same path as me, whether you're a complete amateur or you're a pro. It doesn't matter. This path is extremely relatable to most photographers out there, as most of us have to start from the bottom and work our way up to where we're at. So let's go over very briefly the parameters of what we're doing. And just a heads up, I'm going to be dividing this video into multiple different chapters. So if you're an experienced photographer and you just want to see the differences, then by all means skip to that part. But if you're looking to get into real estate photography and you want to see the different steps and see me explain things in a little bit more detail, you're going to want to watch from the beginning to end as I explain things, and you may not understand if you just skip straight to the end. So very quickly, let's dive into the parameters of each camera so you know exactly what I'm shooting, so that question doesn't come up later in the video. So one of the first things that we're going to be doing here is we're going to be shooting in HDR photography today. We're not going to be shooting any flambient or ambient style photography, as I do not know how to do that with an iPhone, and I've never even attempted it. And if you're shooting flash and ambient, you're probably not shooting on an iPhone. So we're going to be shooting HDR photography. What is HDR photography? HDR photography is essentially you take multiple different images at different exposures, you merge them together, and then you edit that one image, and that is your one image. We're going to be shooting HDR photography, but we're also going to be shooting separate shots for our window pools, and we'll get into window pools later on in the video, but we're going to be shooting separate shots for our window pools. So we're going to have HDR photography with window pools in each one of our shots. And yes, you can do a window pool with an iPhone, and that one was always tricky, but it's going to be fun to go over. Next, we are not going to be using any polarizers for this video. I am a massive advocate for polarizers. If you are shooting real estate photography, I don't care which of these cameras you're using, if you are shooting real estate photography and you do not own a polarizer, what are you doing? It is the cheapest investment you will make in this business, and it makes your photos look 10 times better. So please buy a polarizer. Now, when I started my business, I did not have a polarizer for my iPhone because I didn't even know what I was doing when I started. But when I got my Canon M50 and I got my Sony A7IV, I got polarizers for both of them, and I used them on every single one of my shoots. There's not one shoot I did not use a polarizer, and I'm a massive advocate for it. But in this video, I don't own one for my iPhone, so unfortunately, I'm gonna have to pass on the polarizer today. But please, use a polarizer. It's worth the investment. So we're shooting HDR, we're not using a polarizer. Let me go into the file formats. So for the iPhone, we don't have the option. Typically, I would like to shoot in a RAW file format, which is basically a larger image, or there's more data in the image, so you have more to edit, but we don't have that option with the iPhone. The Canon M50, we're going to be shooting RAW because we cannot increase our exposure brackets, and I'll go over that in just a minute. We cannot increase our exposure brackets to more than 3 different stops. So we're going to be shooting RAW so we can get the most amount in our editing when we go to the editing table. And lastly, I'm going to be shooting in the Sony A7IV. I'm going to be shooting JPEG. Now I know that might be a little controversial and people are going to have different opinions when it comes to JPEG versus RAW, but the Sony A7IV's file sizes are so large that I've never had an issue with JPEG files, and if I shot in a RAW file format on the Sony A7IV, it would take up a massive amount of storage on my computer, and with the frequency that I shoot, I'd be running out of storage constantly. So I usually only shoot JPEG for real estate photography when it comes to my Sony. So first, let's dive into the iPhone. Now, this is the iPhone 13 Pro. The iPhone 13 Pro does not have the option of allowing me to turn off HDR photography. This shoots automatic HDR photography. Automatic HDR photography on the iPhone basically means that whenever you go, and you'll see this later on in the video, whenever we go in and we take the Canon M50 photos and the Sony A7IV photos, we have to merge them separately in Lightroom and then edit the photos. Apple has its own process in camera, or in the phone, I should say, that allows it to merge the photo as one. So when you just normally take a picture, it's automatically going to take it at different exposures, it's going to merge it, and that is the final image you're going to see. Now I believe in the iPhone 12 and earlier models you have the option of turning HDR off, but in the iPhone 13 and further on in those models, you do not have that option. You can turn off HDR video, but you cannot turn HDR photo. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments, but I could never find it, and I've never found a way to get around that or just shoot separate brackets. On top of that, we do not get to control our isolation or even anything in our exposure triangle when it comes to the iPhone. It shoots smart HDR, which basically means it looks at its scene. Now, we can increase the exposure a little bit when we're on site, but it doesn't do that much of a difference. Now, we are gonna try it in a couple of the listings, but for the most part, we're kind of stuck with what the iPhone gives us, and we don't get to play around with any manual settings. So the iPhone is pretty much almost black and white, I should say, when it comes to shooting photography. Now, again, it is nice because you do not have to merge anything, but you do not get the option of messing with your shutter, your isolation, or your f-stop. So you're kind of stuck at the mercy of the iPhone when it comes to it in that aspect. But this is an incredible camera, and we'll get into that later. So now we're going to be moving into the Canon M50. The Canon M50 was my very first camera that I owned, and I really did love this camera, and we're going to be using the 11 to 22 millimeter lens on it. Normally I use the 10 to 18 because it gives me a little bit more of a wider angle, but I let somebody borrow it when I started this video, and I didn't have it, or I didn't get the lens back until midway of making these videos, and I wanted to remain consistent, so we just stuck with the 11 to 22. Now, something to keep in mind, this camera is a crop-centered camera, so even though you're shooting at 11 to 22, the zoom still zooms in more than what you would expect. I believe it's 1.5 times more zoom. So even if you're shooting at 12 millimeters, you're really not shooting at 12 millimeters. So just keep that in mind, and you're gonna see that later on in the photos as well as we go over it. The iPhone actually has an ultra-wide angle lens, and I believe the ultra-wide angle lens goes to 14 millimeters. Let me know in the comment section if I'm wrong. It took me a while to find that information. But the Canon M50 doesn't get that wide. It never will because it's a crop sensor, so that's something to keep in mind. However, the Canon M50 is the first camera out of the three where you actually can mess with the settings. So we are going to control the ISO on this camera, we're going to control our f-stop, and we're going to control our shutter. The shutter for this video doesn't matter. The shutter speed doesn't really play a significant role no matter how high it gets because it's sitting still on a tripod. So we don't have to worry about that. Our ISO, we're going to want to keep it between 1 and 800. I never like to go to 800. I rarely do, but especially with something like the Canon M50 because there's going to be noise in the photo. We're going to get into that as well. There's going to be noise in the photo, and noise is probably the biggest killer of a good photo, and we don't want any noise. So I really aim to stay between 1 and 400, and you're going to want your f-stop to be between f9 to f11. Sometimes you get away with f8, but you really don't want to go any lower than f8, and you really don't want to go any higher at f11. Otherwise, you're going to have to increase your ISO or increase your shutter. Your f-stop, really quickly, for those who don't know, the f-stop is basically the area of focus. So for portraits, headshots, you're going to see anywhere between like a 1.8 to 2.8. So you get that real detail in there. But for a real estate photographer, you're gonna wanna shoot and you're gonna wanna get the most in your image, and f9 through f11 is where you can capture the whole room and not really worry about anything being out of focus. Sometimes if something's in the way of the camera can get out of focus, but when you're shooting at an f9 or an f11, you really don't have to worry about that. The camera will still capture the whole room anyways. So that's what we're gonna be shooting at. That's my little tangent on f-stops. So I always mess up when I say this, but we're gonna be shooting 3 exposure stops, and it's gonna be +2 and -2. So basically we're gonna be doing 3 different photos. It's gonna take them all at one time, and then it's gonna be the normally exposed photo, +2 overexposed and -2 underexposed, and then we're gonna merge that and make our one photo in Lightroom. We're also gonna be shooting in the RAW file format. Like I said earlier, RAW files are a lot larger, so there's a lot more to work with in terms of editing, and when we get to these darker, lower exposed homes, we're really gonna need the RAW files in order to be able to get the most out of these really dark rooms. One of the homes that we're shooting in this video is a home that has no lights, and it's not because I didn't turn them on, but it's because the home literally had no power. You will photograph homes like this as a real estate photographer, and that is probably one of your worst case scenarios when it comes to having a camera like this and having to photograph, but we're gonna showcase everything in this video. And like I said, no polarizer for this video, which really hurts my heart because I love using a polarizer. And I basically went over all the parameters that I can think of. If there's something specific that you're looking for, let me know down in the comment section down below. But really just talking about the exposure triangle and the different bracket settings are probably gonna be the most important thing for this video, along with the file format. So now we're done with the Canon M50, let's move on to the Sony A7IV. So the Sony A7IV is the powerhouse of the crew. It is my favorite camera by far. I love my Sony. I don't know if I'll ever go back to Canon, which is another video for another day, but I love the Sony so much. Now, the Sony has a bunch of different settings that we could talk about all day, but we're gonna go into the basic stuff that we need for this video. Like I said, no polarizer, we're gonna be shooting HDR. It's essentially the same isolation, the same f-stops, the same shutter speeds, everything's the same except the exposure brackets. The exposure brackets are pretty crazy when it comes to the Sony A7IV. It has multiple options when it comes to exposure brackets. Now, this is gonna be a little controversial, and I know someone's gonna hate on me in the comments for it, especially other photographers, but it can shoot all the way up to a 9 bracket shot in some cases. We're gonna shoot a couple 9 bracket shots. I know that people are gonna be like, that's overkill, you don't need a 9 bracket. I know, but the Sony can do it. The Sony can shoot a 9 bracket shot, and why else would it be there if you didn't use it, okay? So the Sony A7IV is a massive price jump when it comes in comparison to these other two cameras. So I wanna showcase what the Sony can do, and one of the best features about the Sony A7IV is its ability to shoot in low light, and when I say low light, I mean low light. I mean, this thing can shoot in like the freaking dark, man. It's crazy, okay? And we're gonna get into that. So I just wanted to be able to shoot to its maximum capacity and really pushing the edge when it came to the Sony to show you the actual differences. Not every shot that we're gonna shoot is gonna be a 9 exposure bracket, but we're gonna shoot some shots that are gonna be 9 different shots merged into one, but for the most part, we're also gonna do 5 different shots merged into one, so we're gonna have a 5 bracket shot as opposed to a 9 bracket. So there's gonna be a little bit of a variation between the two, and on top of all of that, we're also gonna be shooting in JPEG like I said before. File sizes on the Sony are massive, and just a compressed one RAW file can be up to like 20 megabytes compressed. If you're shooting an uncompressed RAW shot on a Sony, good luck. You're gonna be at your computer for a massive amount of time, okay? So we're not even gonna mess around with the RAW file format. I've been shooting JPEG on my Sony for probably about 1.5 years now, and I have never had one house that I photograph, especially the ones that we've seen today, even in the ones we see today, I've never had one issue with noise. I've never had one issue with anything shooting JPEG. Let me know in the comment section down below if I missed anything that you wanted to see specifically on these 3 cameras. I don't want to waste so much time talking about all 3 because I can talk about them all day. But I do love all 3 of these cameras, and they all have pretty unique settings, so I just wanted to go over them very quickly for people that do not know what we're going to be doing today and exactly what we're going to be shooting or what they're going to see on screen. On top of that, there's some things I want to point out before we start editing and going to these other homes. That being, one of the biggest things that we're going to notice today is noise. If you don't know what noise is basically where it looks like static in the photo because you don't have enough there to be able to bring out the shadows in a photo. It's kind of the basic explanation. You can get a lot deeper with that, but for the most part, we're gonna see some noise today, and I'm gonna show you in which instances you're going to see noise and when you're not going to see noise and the differences between the 3. All right, so now with all that preliminary information out of the way, guys, let's start going to these homes here, and we're gonna start at some of the nicer homes that have a lot better exposure and even lighting, and then we're gonna kind of work our way down to the less exposed homes so that you can start to see the gap in equipment and you can just start to see the differences overall. So let's not waste any more time, guys, and let's head over to the first house. This is our first photo. This is gonna be our best case scenario with the iPhone. One of the important things we wanna notice is our histogram here. The histogram is very important thing to look out for. You always want it to try and keep it in the middle and to the right. You never really are gonna see instances where you're gonna want it all the way over here. There are gonna be some instances where it does look kind of wonky, but for the most part, it's always gonna be in the middle of the right, so keep an eye on that. Now, I do want you guys to pay attention as we do iPhone photography to look to the corners. As you can see here in the corners, you start to see some of this, this is noise, basically. I just want you guys to kind of pay attention for that. And if we lift up the shadows, you're gonna be able to see that we're also gonna get noise in some of our darker colors that we bring the shadows out of. So like right here, you're gonna see, obviously there's a lot of noise in that window. I just want you guys to pay attention to that. We don't really need to do too much with this photo here because it was in the evening and these windows are polarized. There's not really much that we can do in terms of a window pull. No camera is going to be able to outfocus the polarized window. So all we could really do maybe is drop the saturation a little bit. And then if you want to not lose the color in the floor, you could simply just object select this floor here, and you can increase the saturation. Now, if you notice here, we are right to the middle to the right of the histogram. So it's not gonna be the worst photo in the world. And you're gonna see us do some linear gradients a lot in the other photos. We don't wanna do it too much because as you can see, the noise becomes more obvious. So unfortunately, we're gonna actually delete that mask just because we don't want the noise to be any more prevalent than it already is. But this is pretty much the finished photo. We don't really need to do too much. And we're gonna move on to the Canon M50 and the Sony A7IV. And again, this is our best case scenario. And as we move on, you're going to see some of our worst case scenarios. All right, so now we're in our Canon M50 photo, and you're gonna see in the bottom left corner here that we have 3 shots. This is the 3-shot bracket that we took with the Canon M50. So that we're gonna hit select, and we're going to grab all these, and then we're gonna group them into a stack. This is the photo merge process I was telling you about earlier. Then we're gonna go down here. Again, we're gonna right click, photo merge, and then into HDR. This is gonna bring up this preview window. Now you can auto stack if you have multiple images at one time. We're gonna just go ahead and hit merge. This is gonna merge this into one photo. And you do this basically for every single photo when you are editing HDR. This was very quick because it was a 3 bracketed shot. However, if you've got like 50 shots from that day's shoot, you might as well make some coffee or go for a walk and then come back when it's ready. So as you can see, this is a lot smaller of a shot. It basically, you know, it's crop censored in, so it's not as wide as the iPhone or the Sony. You're gonna see that this actually balanced out to to the right of the histogram, which is nice. Again, this is probably our best case scenario, so we don't have a lot of things that we need to do with this. Again, if you want to get rid of those yellows, you can just easily remove the saturation there because there isn't any yellow in the walls or in the room naturally. But if you want to add a little bit more color, like I said we did in the other photo, you can just simply add some saturation and some texture if you would like. Now, one of the things we can do with this one, I didn't actually test this. I want to see if this works right here. Enable profile corrections. Okay, so it actually identified that this is our Canon camera. Most of the time it does that on its own. Sometimes you have to put it in your camera in there if it doesn't automatically register. But as you can see, it adjusts and fixes any warping or distortion in the photo, and it actually automatically makes it a little bit brighter, which is nice. You're gonna see that if we bring up the shadows in this photo here, if we scroll back up here, you're gonna see that it's not as much noise. There is still a little bit, but it's almost barely even noticeable. And on top of that, if we go to our corners over here, you're gonna see that there's not really any, and it's not even gonna be noticeable. Again, to the fine eye, you may be able to identify some, but honestly, without even touching this photo, well, we touched it a little bit, but it looks pretty good already as is. If you wanna get rid of some of that blue in the window, we may be able to drop this. You could do that if you want to, or you could object select, get rid of the saturation here, but keep the saturation in the window. That's completely up to you, but this already is pretty much a basically easy photo to just export and then upload. I don't even think this needs any Photoshop. This should just be pretty much ready to deliver. Okay, so lastly, we're on the Sony picture. Now, you're gonna notice here, this is at number 5 because there's 5 photos in this bracket. This is our merged image. I merged it just to save a little time. We're gonna go into our profile corrections real quick. As you can see, it does make it a little bit brighter. Now, you'll notice that it actually went to more of the middle of the histogram. That's not a big deal. All you have to do is just simply raise the exposure. We're gonna drop our highlights a little bit. Again, we're just gonna play a little bit around with this one. You know, we're not gonna get too crazy with the editing in all the photos. Just kind of showing you some examples here of like how to edit a photo normally. Now, when you go wide, one of the things you'll notice that it does get a little bit darker on the sides. One of the ways that I like to fix that is I'll drop a linear gradient and I'll start it midway, kind of like this. And then I'll raised the shadows and the exposure a little bit so it kind of evens out the tones. Now this is completely optional, and again, I would spend a little bit more time on this if I had, if this was for a client, but this is just kind of showing you like just the progression of like naturally editing a photo. And what we're gonna notice as well, I'm gonna zoom in just a second, just kind of raising that exposure. You're gonna see here that there is absolutely no noise in the window at all. You don't see any kind of fuzziness. And then if we go to the corners, you don't see any noise at all. This is gonna be something that's consistent with the Sony. I can't speak on the nicer Canons. I'm sure that they do the same thing, but this is just something with Sony. And you're gonna notice when we do a quick comparison at the end of this, that look how much wider the room is. When we were with the Canon, we got all the way to this plug here, but we didn't get probably till about like right here where I have the mouse. You know, we got all this extra room, and this is simply from wall to wall. I don't like showing the inside walls. I just like showing the exterior wall from wall to wall. That's a personal choice for me. It's one that I recommend, and it's one that my realtors are happy with. But I'm gonna show you the comparison of all three photos right now. So as you can see, as we pointed out in the photos, we had a bunch of even exposure. We didn't have to really worry about window pulls, so that wasn't a big issue. And there wasn't that much of a difference in the photography overall. But now when we head to this next listing, this is a newer build as well, but it didn't have as nice of exposure and even lighting. And you're gonna start to see some of the differences in between the equipment. So let's head to the second one. Okay, so this is going to be our basically like mid-level home. This is a new build that was built a couple years ago, but our only sources of light are gonna be the windows, and then a small source of light is gonna be from the ceiling fan. Now this was shot on the Sony. As you can see, we were able to shoot from wall to wall, no problem. If we go over here and click on the Canon photo, you're gonna notice that we had to get in, we had to zoom in a lot more, and we weren't able to capture everything that we're looking for. And there's a little bit of a color variation just because there's different color profiles on the Sony and the Canon. Now, if we go over here, I already kind of started messing with the iPhone photo, but you're gonna notice that the sharpness is really sharp in these lower exposed environments, and we're gonna get some sharpness on the carpet, and we're already starting to notice some noise in the corners here. Now we're gonna try and mess around with this a little bit in Photoshop, and I didn't want to show you guys the whole editing process, but I'll show you the final results of each one of these before we move on to the next home. All right, so as you can see, there's starting to be a little bit of a difference in equipment and the overall quality of the photos. But now we're gonna head over to our next listing, and then this next one was definitely a fixer-upper that's been on the market now for about a month, and you're gonna see some really big key differences because this home had no power, and you had to rely on the window exposure alone to be able to take the shots, and we're gonna see how that turned out. So let's go check it out. So as you can see from the clips, we're in a more exposurely challenged environment, is what you could say. And I'm gonna be running through with the iPhone, the Canon M50, and of course the Sony A7IV. And I'll be showing you guys the exact differences in the image quality as we run through this home. So let's dive into those images. All right guys, now I'm in the process of editing these exterior ones for the iPhone, but this is also kind of consistent with the Canon. I just want to bring it up really quickly and make a really important point that now we have an even overcast day, which means that we're not getting any harsh lights. So this, and you're going to notice a lot with the iPhone, you're going to get a lot of over sharpness in photos. You actually get some blurriness in the corners there, but when we try and up our shadows or increase the shadows, you're going to notice that we start to get some noise here in the center of the image. Now, there's no real workaround for this, so unfortunately you kind of have to keep your shadows lower if you don't want to see that noise be as prevalent. And again, if you're looking at photos through the phone and stuff, you're not going to really probably notice it. However, if you just try to like lift up all your shadows, you're going to notice that you have a really bad noise problem. So we do have to leave it a little bit more underexposed on the patio, but I wanted to make that important point for you guys when you guys are seeing the final photos, why the iPhone is a little bit darker and the Canon M50 as well, as opposed to the Sony's photos. So like we talked in the editing, one of the best things that we can have happen is getting an overcast. Now it had just rained, so the overcast was a little strong, and it would have been nice to have a little bit of sunlight, but we can still make do with overcast because we have a completely even exposure. So we're allowed to do a lot more in a photo and when we're editing, and it makes it a little bit easier to edit no matter what you're photographing on. All right, so moving on to the bathroom of the home with no power. As you can see, we are missing a little bit of a light there, which is interesting, but to my surprise, this is the Canon M50 photo. It actually looks pretty good merged. I'm pretty surprised. I thought there'd be a lot more noise, but to my surprise, there isn't. So I'm curious to edit this one a little bit more. However, if we get into the iPhones, you're going to see that noise is very prevalent. And it is less than stunning. So again, this bathroom had no light, so this is just what the camera can do without any light at all, which is again even surprising that it could get this. But if you were to use the flash on the camera, you're going to get a really overexposed spot, and the rest are going to be shadows. So this is the most even photo that you can take, unfortunately. But in this case, this photo's probably not gonna come out looking good. But I'm excited to show you guys all the photos from this house. So let's check them out. This last home here, we're not actually doing any interiors. I'm just gonna be showing you the exteriors of this home. Now this is gonna be your worst case scenario as a photographer if you do not have very professional equipment. This was taken at around 5 to 6. Sunset was about 8:30, I believe. And so the sun was setting right behind the house. So the house was facing to the east, the sun setting in the west. And we had the sun in the background, as you're gonna be able to see before we start actually editing the photos and you see the final results. You're gonna see where the sun was, and you're gonna see why this was such a challenge. This is a constant problem in real estate photography, as you don't really get the benefit of being able to make your schedule perfectly all the time, and there are gonna be instances where you're just gonna be put in this scenario and you're gonna have to do the absolute best that you can and provide the best photos possible. All right guys, we are in the home stretch now. So we are going to look at the Sony photo here. And again, like I stated before, the sun was in the back right of the home, which caused this massive shadow on the front of the home. Now in the Sony photo, if we raise our shadows and we even raise our exposure, you're gonna notice that yes, we do get some glare and some sunspots, but we don't get any noise in the image, which is really nice because again, this is our worst case scenario and one of the most challenging photos for you to edit as a photographer, specifically real estate photographer. And then when you get to the iPhone photo, we got one sunspot there, but even when we raise our shadows, we actually still get some pretty good detail in the grass. However, we do come across some noise on the door, in the garage door and stuff like that. However, we do overall still have a kind of nice photo based on the circumstances. And then if we get into our last photo, the Canon M50 is going to be the most challenging for me because even though we do get some noise reduction as opposed to the iPhone photo, we do have these really harsh rays and we do have like 1 or 2 sunspots. So it is going to be challenging, and that's why I say with the Canon M50, these circumstances make it almost impossible to shoot in because a 3 bracket shot just isn't going to be enough. I mean, we're losing detail on the brick layout, and overall this is just going to be a really one shot that's going to be challenging to edit. So I look forward to actually showing you guys the final results, which I'll go ahead and do right now. So really quickly guys, before we take this into Photoshop, I just wanted you to see the different photos and understand that I tried to raise the exposure to get a little bit more out of this here and blend it, but I can't raise the exposure without completely losing all of the sharpness or clarity in the grass there. And you're gonna notice in all 3 of these photos, there's different things that I was able to do and not do. Like I said, I was able to do a little bit more in this photo, but unfortunately there just wasn't enough there. And the Sony photo is the only one I'm actually able to raise the exposure, keep the detail, and be able to blend that later in Photoshop so it looks a little bit more even and a lot less noticeable. So I just wanted to point that out before I take it into Photoshop and you guys see the final images and are wondering why in the world that this is going to be a lot more blended than the Canon M50 or the iPhone photos. So to summarize, as you can see, all 3 of these pieces of equipment are doable in the right circumstances. The Canon M50 is a really great job because you can start messing with the settings. The iPhone in itself has a better wide angle lens than the Canon, but of course there's the drawback of noise being in the photos if you go too wide and you don't have enough lighting or exposure in the room. And of course, it goes without saying, the Sony A7IV is just a powerhouse. The key factors are here that you can make money with all of these cameras. It's definitely doable, and under the right circumstances, the iPhone does well and so does the Canon. However, when you do get those homes that aren't exposed very well and don't have the best opportunities to take the best pictures, you're really gonna need to rely on professional equipment to get the job done. If you're gonna be shooting for a realtor, maybe 1 or 2 realtors, like it's a friend or you're practicing, the Canon or the iPhone are great things to practice on. Of course, with the iPhone, you don't get to learn about the exposure triangle, and you don't get to learn how to really take an even photo because, again, you don't have the balance on there like you do on the Canon, where you can see whether or not your camera's balanced and all the other stuff that goes along with that. However, both of these cameras really do a great job of getting you ready and getting your foot in the door to be able to step up to something like the Sony in the future. I'm not trying to steer you in the direction of the Sony because people use Canon as well. There's other Canon cameras that people use in real estate all the time. It's a constant back and forth. But this is just the path that I took, and I'm very happy with the path that I took. I hope that you found this video helpful. I really wanted to make this video because this video is something that I would have needed when I started real estate photography, because I needed to see how much money it would actually be worth to me to invest in an equipment setup like the Sony. And I'm hopeful that somebody's gonna watch this video and be grateful that they can see how much of a difference there is in the actual quality of the overall photos. So I hope you guys found this information helpful. And again, if you did find this information helpful, please hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel goes a absolutely long way. This video took so much time and so much effort like you guys wouldn't believe. I had to go to multiple different houses, take multiple different shoots with different cameras, and talk to multiple different realtors and get permission from a bunch of people. So I want to be able to make more videos like this, the ones that are informative and help you make really good choices when it comes to upgrading your equipment and when it's the right time to do something like that. So if you found this helpful, please liking and subscribing goes a massively long way, and it helps me make more videos like this for you guys. With all that being said, I know this was a long video, so if you're here to the end, please let me know down in the comment section down below what you found helpful and what you're looking for in the future. And with all that being said, I will see you shareholders in the next video.